Well, it's a story that just won't go away, and it's changing by the minute. Welcome into another instant analysis with our insiders, Elliotte Friedman and Chris Johnston. Gentlemen, we know all the details, except a couple of big ones still to be crystallized, namely the where. If the NHL season resumes, where would the two hub cities be? It's a very fluid situation, Elliotte. Walk us through what you're hearing.
Well, I think I've probably been hearing the same things that you and Chris have been hearing, that over the weekend, some news got out about hotel rooms being booked in Vegas and Vancouver, and that's why a lot of us were beginning to believe that those two cities were the front runners, if not absolute guarantees, to be the two hubs. Well, there's, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but I just got a tip on Tuesday night and just was warned, don't absolutely say that those cities are guarantees yet, because one of the things I'm hearing is there are some discussions that are still going on, particularly with Vancouver, about the state of the quarantine and how exactly it would work, that have prevented them from nailing it down. So I don't know if I would say it's a huge issue, but there is a snag there that it's at least slightly slowed down the Vancouver process, and everybody has to work through it before we can absolutely proclaim 100% that Vancouver is going to be one of the hub cities here.
Well, and the devil's in the details, Elliotte. And I think that that's one thing those of us on the outside need to understand, is that there's so much being worked through as part of this process. We know the NHL has taken the 10 original hub city contenders and eliminated 4 already. And just in the last couple of days, the bids in Toronto and Edmonton have seen some changes to their bid package. And I think a lot of people thought, Elliotte, when the Canadian government, federal government announced last week that, okay, that you can create this group quarantine situation. It allows teams to get around the 14-day quarantine once they're traveling up for training camp to start the competition phase, that everything was done. But that still left a lot of discussions with local health authorities. And it sounds as though, to me, some of those discussions are partially, I guess, what's kept this from moving forward.
The dreaded bubble, and we'll see if the bubble has burst on some of these Canadian markets that are very eagerly anticipating an NHL hub come the resumption. The other big issue, guys, is there's so many logistics to work out still. There's a whole number of players across the Atlantic in European cities. They've got to matriculate over here and get back onto North American soil. How is this going to work, CJ?
Well, the migration's starting. The jets are getting fueled up as we're speaking right now. And, I know, for example, a group of the players that have been back in Finland at home there during the NHL pause, they've arranged for a charter flight on Friday that will bring them back to New York City. And then obviously those players will disperse to their home cities from there. I think the Swedes have had some similar conversations in terms of, organizing a group charter back. And so, you're starting to see players make the move towards their home city. Obviously these players still don't know 100% if the return to play is happening. They haven't voted on it at this point. They haven't seen the final proposal, so to speak, the protocols that are going to govern this, not to mention the small issue of a CBA extension that's being tacked onto it. But despite some of those things they don't know, we are seeing more and more players come to their cities, start to observe the quarantines they have to, and then obviously join phase 2 and hopefully training camps in a few weeks' time.
All right, Chris, you alluded to something there, and Elliotte touched on voting. And that's maybe one of the bigger hurdles that hasn't been discussed a ton is the players have to sign off on this, not just the resumption of play, but this potential extension to the CBA. Walk us through that whole process.
I have to say, David, last weekend, I think a lot of these players got shaken. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I speak to 750 players. I don't think there's 750 people in the world that would want to even talk to me. But, the small cross-section of guys that I spoke to tell me that people were really shaken by all of the news of last weekend. The positive tests, and not just hockey, but all the various different sports, and the fact that Tampa had to temporarily close. I'm with Chris in the sense that the fact that a number of players are making their way over from Europe is a good sign. I'm not crazy that some of them are taking 2 and 3 connections flying commercial, but private charters weren't an option for everybody. So what I think is going to happen is in about a week's time, we're going to see a potentially, I think it's most likely to be one big vote. And I'm told every player is going to have a vote. Like, this isn't, in the history, when you vote on a CBA, everybody gets a vote. And I am under the impression that's going to be the case here. I also checked the Players Association Constitution. A simple majority carries. I think there's some people who are a bit more concerned about the vote after last weekend. I think that one way they're going to get through this, Chris, is say, A, we believe in our bubbles, that we'll be able to make them as airtight as possible. And Chris, something you've talked about, and that's for language who are players who are uncomfortable with playing, that if you don't want to play, will they give you the option of not doing it?
Right. And we know that there's already that conversation out there. There was a general manager's call last Friday night, and a Western Conference-based GM on that call disclosed to the group that, one of his players has already told him he's not going to play even if this plan goes forward. And so, I'm sure that individual isn't alone out there either. That's just an example of some of the word that's trickling through the industry. I'm like you, Elliotte. Some of the guys I talked to have expressed some concerns, some doubts. I talked to a few coaches in the last day or two here who think that, their teams are having some nagging thoughts about whether they should be returning. I mean, this is not completely unanimous at this stage, but, I can't really handicap how that vote will go. And that's why every day this thing is important as they finalize some of these details to be voted upon. And then ultimately the players will have their say whether they want to proceed to the next phase.
David, I am under the impression that there's one player in particular who made a passionate speech on one of the calls in defense of the season. We'll see where it goes. That player did not want to be identified and wanted to leave his comments on the call, but we'll see where it goes. I think there's a lot of passionate people on both sides, but there's no question the events of the last few days has really shaken some of them.
Well, it's been a 100-plus day marathon to get to this point, but we really are on the clock, gentlemen. Remember, it's just a little over 2 weeks away when officially Phase 3 is expected to begin for the resumption of the National Hockey League, and that would be July 10th. So a lot to be figured out between now and then. These guys are bringing all the information on a daily basis. Thanks to our insiders, Elliotte and CJ.